rest. We all need rest.
Amen. Blessings to all, wherever you are, however you are, whyever you are. We had a conversation the other day that inspired me to follow up on it, as I feel there may be others who would benefit from it, which was kind of a follow-up question from your conversation you had with Joe Rogan last year.
Oh, by the way, my son Rocco, who I love beyond description, vegan.
No.
Yes.
He looks like he needs to eat more.
Yeah.
You know, I've heard you speak about veganism throughout.
You sure it's not veganism? I like vegan.
I know you like veganism. The majority of humans that I've interfaced with call it veganism.
Vegan.
I don't really even care for it because it's another label, but you know,
it's just a diet choice.
Yeah,
I think most of the time.
My question was the other day, you know, I've heard you discuss it with people, talk about it, potentially poke and prod, potentially name call, potentially comment on it from your perspective in a way that others who follow that path of plant-based diet might consider offensive or something like that. But me as your son, being behind the scenes of, you know, dog boating, rock and rolling, etc., I kind of, you know, I know that you love me, I know that you accept me, and yet
totally.
My question,
unconditionally.
My question was to you the other day. You know, I've grown up in this hunting culture. I grew up, you know, with chores like sweeping the garage and helping you spread the legs of a deer or an antelope and gut and, you know,
turning them into family-sized portions.
Yes, all of the above. And so my question is, you know, what were your thoughts on your son being a vegan?
The only thought I had is a minor consequence. Well, the most important consequence is your health. And I understand that your choice is for your health. End of discussion. Nothing else matters. I think it's important to note that one of the reasons this question would be worth pursuing is because I am the whack master. Is because I kill many, many things to feed many, many people, to balance many, many herds, because I'm like Cochise or Crazy Horse or Og from the year -6000, where my sharp stick provided life to my tribe. So what I do as a hunter, fisherman, trapper, doing the tooth, fang, and claw, perfect, natural, God's creation ballet, is as perfect as you choosing to only eat vegetable matter, vegetable and fruit matter. Diet does not say anything about the character or soul of man. Conduct, integrity, honesty, forthrightness, caring, giving, loving, identifies the character and soul of man.
I agree. And
so but you choosing to be a vegan, it's you must have seen the Pierce Morgan interview where he sat across from me. He thought he was going to get me. Go, all right, Ted. Well, let's say your son comes home and says, Dad, I'm a homosexual. What'd you say? I go, cool, son. Get the shotgun. Let's go hunting. Yeah. Like zero.
Yeah.
Choices and pursuits of individuality. I'm a huge genuflector at the altar of individualism and independence, and that's what I think, as I followed your choice in veganism, you have a digestive complication, and you sought out that sustenance that best serves your quality of life. I'm with you.
Yes, and there was a dynamic of the question the other day when we were having sushi of the delusional aspect of many people who also participate in this path that, you know, I didn't say I want to be vegan. You know, I grew up as a hunter and now I want to be vegan. That was by no means the way in which I aligned with this
and
path.
If you did, even if that would still be legitimate.
Even if I did.
Yeah, sure. Nothing wrong with that. I know where you're going.
And you know, I have this memory of, I don't know how old I was. 2001, 2000 era.
You were a man of conscience already.
Obviously. And I was at the hotel. I stayed back, and you and Mom went to a fur coat store in San Francisco or something.
Yeah.
And you had this encounter.
Assault.
With
we were assaulted because we eat meat.
With these animal rights activists that somehow thought, being animal rights activists, they were going to pour red paint or blood or red pig's blood or something like that.
Well, there's a number.
They threatened to kill us.
They threatened to kill us because we had turkey on Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
That's really weird.
Yeah.
So, but I think the ultimate overview is that your choice, or anyone's choice, to be vegan, or maybe they want to just eat pine bark, of zero consequence. Maybe they just want to eat fish scales instead of the fillet. I just could not care less. Let me summarize it like this. Paul McCartney is a gung-ho vegan. My friend Tommy Shaw, my blood brother Tommy Shaw, spent much of his adult life as a strict vegan. My genuine soulmate, Motor City blood brother musician Michael Lutz is a gung-ho 100% vegan. Those choice, I think Tommy's choice, because he saw some pigs slaughtered one time and he didn't want to have anything to do with that. But Paul McCartney is hardcore, and I would call an unfortunate vegan, in that he did an interview in Detroit one time, and of course Detroit influenced the Beatles, and Motown influenced everybody, and Detroit is notorious for having killer soulful musicians. And the interviewer asked Paul McCartney, what does he think about being in Detroit, performing with his band Wings as the epicenter of such musical influence. And he went on and on about the Four Tops and the Temptations, Little Stevie Wonder, and all things Motown. And they asked him about, I think What I Like About You, the Romantics, had a big song at the time. They asked him about it. Oh, that's a great song. It's almost Beatles-like in many ways. And the Beatles kind of morphed into the American Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley, Little Richard, Detroit energy level. And so the interviewer says, well, you know, our number one guitar player in Detroit is Ted Nugent. You know, what do you think of Ted Nugent? He went on just an unfortunate, hateful, nasty rant attacking me. I'm not a real musician. Ted Nugent's not a real musician. He's a coward because he murders innocent animals. And he's never had a good musical idea. I can't stand the guy, I can't believe anybody would listen to his music. Really, really unfortunate. And so, being a smartass like I am, I might be the czar of smartass when appropriate, when need be. The disc jockey couldn't wait to get me on to retaliate. So he called me. He goes, "Did you hear what Paul McCartney said?" Everybody's been telling me about it. Yeah, I heard exactly. He said, "Would you like to respond?" I go, "I'm always ready for a response. I like to talk about music, good, bad, or ugly. I'd love to respond." So they said, "Well, after hearing Paul's attack on you, what would you have to say to Paul McCartney?" And I said, "Only one thing. Thank you. Thank you for enriching the world with your incredible art. Thank you for pursuing your God's gift of songwriting and musicality that plays such a role in my happiness and in everybody I know's happiness. There's not a life that's existed since 1962 that hasn't been positively touched by all things McCartney, Lennon music. So, Paul, thank you very much for your great music." Well, that kind of grenaded the paradigm of the vegan being the sweetheart, peace and loving guy, and the whackmaster being a vicious, attacker of, animals and people. Diet has no indicating value whatsoever to the spirit of man. Conduct and the other things I mentioned. How is a person reliable? You can be a vegan and still be my blood brother. You are my blood brother. Tommy Shaw, when he was a vegan, was my blood brother. Michael Lutz is my blood brother. I don't care what you eat. as long as you do it with respect to the origins of that food. And I must finalize it as I did on Joe Rogan, which got one of the biggest response of all the interviews and podcasts I've done, is that as more and more people turn to a more plant-based diet, and there's nothing wrong with that. I can't find anything wrong with it. I think go nuts. The production of beef and poultry and pork and veal and lamb continues to increase. So all the vegans on the planet have not reduced the death of any animals. The mass slaughter, which should be applauded and respected, is the source of protein and nutrition that allows our fellow man to live. I want to support the system by which my fellow man lives. Now, can there be improvements in the mass slaughter of creatures for human consumption? You think? There could be all kinds of improvements for the benefit of a quality of life, from the abuse of substances and tobacco and drugs and alcohol and how we abuse each other and engineered recidivism by a failed court system. But quality of life is not going to be determined by anybody's diet this side of cannibalism.
And McDonald's, which is
and some of the mass slaughter has taken on an irresponsible lineage, in that there's not the caring for the animals, especially someone who hunts. And I look at the animal in the eye before I kill him, like the great spirit of the Native Americans and the Aborigines of Africa and beyond. We don't consider our killing of the animal, but rather being the best reasoning predator we can be, to be a samurai at our given methodology of killing that animal. Rather, it is accepting the gift from the Great Spirit by being the best that we can be.
And this also goes into what we were talking about the other day with being single-pointed or one with whatever it is that you're doing. And there's an aspect,
Zen, samurai.
And there's an aspect of it that of this topic that I guess it became extremely relevant for me, being in Los Angeles for the past 10 years. And there's a lot of people who they take up beliefs, or they take up social, political, or even digestive choices, or moral choices, or ethical choices, but not as a means of the actual choice, but as a means of posturing themselves as a hierarchy, above others.
Yeah, some people think that if they're a vegan, they're better than meat eaters because they didn't kill anything. Well, believe me, your bowl of tofu is responsible for more death than I could ever accomplish with my trusty bow and arrow. I promise you that.
And there was an aspect of me growing up in this environment.
Beautiful environment, by the way.
It's quite the environment. And I saw and I experienced, a great deal of death. And I think
sure.
it
you witnessed
showed,
it, yeah.
I witnessed it.
And you tasted it.
I tasted it and I partook in it. And
yeah, you were a great shot.
I remember a conversation I think was had more than one time of we knew where everything on our plate came from, and growing,
and how it was handled,
and where the process. And
we were organic before it became hip.
Right, and there's this trend that feels like for the past 2 years I've been initiated into this lineage of yoga through a teacher, and there's a kind of a subsidiary conversation in yoga that says anytime you open your mouth to tell somebody about your experience, it's a secondhand experience at best.
Certainly.
But someone who, if this is a flame and you touch it, I touch it, it's a firsthand experience. As soon as we start talking about, well, this is how I felt the hotness, you felt the hotness like this, we're now kind of departing from the first moment of it. And for me, yeah, I mean, I was going through health issues. I wanted to stop being bloated. I wanted to stop farting, and getting social anxiety.
The trick with farting is timing.
I know, but it was building up. There was a time.
No, I'm being silly.
I know, but it was a time actually where a girl. I was visiting my friend Steve in Mayo. I was in Jackson, Michigan, and I was visiting home, and I was at a bar, experiencing social bar life as a
You have to tell me about that sometime. I've never experienced social bar life.
It's quite the extraterrestrial experience. But this girl, I'm sitting talking with Steven, and this girl walks up. She's like, "Hey, I hated you. You would fart and lie and say it was me, and I hated you."
She said that to you? Was she drunk?
I had no idea who this person was. This girl walks up to me. She said, I was like, "Whoa, what?" I look at Steven, I was like, "Are you, what are you, who?"
That's what drunk people do.
But she said, "We went to Concord Elementary together, and you would fart, and you would say it was me. I knew it was you, and you would say," and I was like, "Whoa." First off, I'm so sorry. Second off, I'm in the process of a digestive cleansing and healing, that I've been eating food that doesn't really harmonize with my body, and it's been causing me to
But you
fart.
never blamed it on somebody else, did you?
No, but I was taking Lactaid pills.
Because I do.
I was taking pills for being lactose intolerant when I was 10 or 11. Mom was giving me, foods and trying to figure out how to, we were dealing with the mold issues and our health issues, but I was also figuring out why every time I had mac and cheese, I would have stomach pains that I'd curl over. I love mac and cheese, but I would curl over, so it didn't really balance.
Especially when some of your friends, that's all they ate.
So when I, experienced people in LA that had this kind of like posture of superiority with choices, to me it feels kind of disconnected and ingenuous, and also part of this delusion that we were talking about the other day, that is, I think, a byproduct of living in a large city that has grocers and has restaurants and has all of these middlemen that are in between you as human and source, God, nature, earth, Gaia, the actual source of what you're consuming. Well, and they're disconnected, and yet I had this experience of growing up where I was like, I know what it means to see it. And in terms of people protesting, McDonald's seems to be, one of the biggest companies in the world, and I've seen some documentaries. I don't claim to have seen McDonald's warehouses of animals where they get their beef, but in terms of somebody eating meat, I feel like the best way to do it would be to kill it yourself.
That's the most honest way. Now, everybody doesn't have the wherewithal, as we become further disconnected from our own independence and self-sufficiency. A lot of people wouldn't have the faintest idea where to begin. But believe me when I tell you, there are enough wild animals that everybody could hunt. I kill so many deer a year just to balance the herds on the property that I hunt.
We were driving down the highway, there's so many deer
on
the side of the highway.
We counted over 100 between here and Detroit Airport. Slaughtered on the highways. Those could have been better utilized with respect and reverence for the creation that they represent, if more people would hunt and utilize those precious renewable wildlife resources.
Yeah, and as a labels are such a restrictive and condensing label. Like, to call you like, oh, you're a musician, it's like, yeah, that's one component of what and who you are, but to say that's all you are is, wow, what a reductionist point of view. So that being said, as a vegan yogi, on the path of self-realization, and also a practitioner of ahimsa, 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 which is one of the primary practices of yoga, to practice nonviolence and non-harm whenever possible. So to meet the world whenever you can with peace, whenever you can,
positive energy,
whenever you can.
Well, remember too, our native peoples, our native ancestors, there was no violence, there was no ill will, there was zero negativity, including this hunter here. There's no negativity. I'm hunting animals that I cherish. I love these animals. The American bison was revered as a spiritual source for the native peoples. And I gotta tell you, I am the whack master, and I have fun when I do it, because the challenge is fun. And practicing with my bow and my firearms is fun. It's fun to challenge yourself. It's fun to get up early in the morning. It's fun to try to outsmart an animal that God created not to let you outsmart them. All that is indeed fun, because it's exciting, it's thrilling, it's challenging, it's disciplining. So there's always going to be fun. But the actual relationship we have with the animal is best described as sacred or spiritual, that we know that they're here to provide us nutrition, and food and clothing and shelter and tools and weapons and medicine, but mostly spirit. That's why my TV show is called The Spirit of the Wild. That's why I had a song, Spirit of the Wild. That's why I had a record when I was still a young man, Spirit of the Wild. So the manifestation of our distancing ourselves from that with which we sustain ourselves, whether it's cutting wood. You think you save wood by protesting wood cutting. Well, I'm sure you made your sign out of a wood product to protest the cutting of wood, you goofball. So that distance where you don't have to hear the chickens scream in their death and agony, you can pretend you're not responsible for their death.
Yeah,
you're just eating McNuggets or whatever they're called.
It's a comfort or peace of mind, but it's actually as a byproduct of disconnect.
And it's irresponsible. Now, I got to tell you, the vast majority of humans, they know their food is dead. And they know part of the money they paid the guy to cook it went to a guy with a knife to get him dead. Most people are smart like that.
I think 99% of the McDonald's eaters don't even ever contemplate
Well, that's different. That McDonald's isn't. It's a restaurant, but you know what I mean. And in my world, I just hang out with really smart, caring, tuned-in people. So, though I may get a false impression with the positive humans around me, you might get a negative impression being in concrete jungle, hand-to-hand combat city zones that I don't think the majority of people are in denial that their hamburger isn't dead and somebody didn't kill that for them. There's only a lunatic fringe that is that stupid. Now, when you have the assembly lines of these fast food restaurants where some of the ingredients are highly suspicious and some of them proven to be downright horrible, the convenience factor has overridden and overpowered the responsible factor. What am I putting? And here's one that you never heard in school, and if I wasn't your dad, you would have never heard it. Sacred temple. What are you fueling your sacred temple with? Smoke? Chemicals? Unknown origins of whatever that is you're putting in your mouth to feed yourself? That disconnect is a manifestation of a cultural abandonment, cultural denial that is plaguing more and more people. I would not shut down McDonald's tomorrow, but I think more and more you're seeing enlightenment and education to tell people that you might want to go to the store and buy some organic vegetables and some organic herbs and maybe a slab of organic pork, and you'd be way better off learning how to care for yourself and support yourself and cook for yourself and see where it comes from. Because
ultimately, if not that, and if that other extreme of fast food every day and with the chemicals and who knows what entering, it's probably producing. I mean, we went to Jackson today, and not to say LA is a safe haven for illness and bad health choices by any means, but I saw humans in Jackson, Michigan today that looked so unhealthy that I can't imagine their level of emotional amplitude goes very high into joy and pleasantness much.
Their gift of God is, if it's 100, they're operating at about 3.
And so I feel like the theme and the motif of this conversation is connection versus disconnect, which also we talked about convenience, which I think goes into this other conversation we've been having, which is the evolution of society, which breeds this democratic republican rift as to how that convenience becomes so prolific that you become disconnected from the source or even the mechanism that is providing the convenience.
Yeah, this is an experiment in self-government. Every American has an absolute moral, intellectual, and I believe spiritual obligation to participate in self-government, which means you hold your elected employees' feet to the constitutional fire so that they represent the self-evident truth and the God-given individual rights so we can remain individuals and respect the gift of life from God. Which oh man, if that could only hold true, huh?
Which, if that's not the, quote unquote, the largest macro version, it's the more macro than first, you, as you mentioned, the temple first. You are your own self-governing
Sure,
institution.
start with self.
With the ingredients you put in here.
Starts there.
So I think that's a good wrap point for
Good food, good sleep, good friends, good energy, good attitude, good spirit.
I remember a good song called "Good Friends in a Bottle of Wine."
Good friends and a bottle of shill.
Indeed, blessings abound. May the force be with you.